And we're live. Gabriel Somoza, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, hello. Nice to be here.
It's good to
How are
have
you?
you. It's good to have you. We have a lot of very interesting conversations on LinkedIn that I really enjoy. Like we've talked about, the vacation, unlimited vacation policy thing. We've talked about, developer pay, salaries. There's a lot of conversations which end up being sort of like maybe like a U.S. capitalistic mindset, and then you bring more of a European mindset to a lot of things, which I really appreciate because it challenges my thinking on a lot of things. So, anyways, I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about based off of all the LinkedIn chats.
Awesome. Yeah, I enjoy that a lot too, and it's the same sentiment back. I mean, hearing from someone far away but also well informed, I mean, this is what you do as well. Definitely helps shape an opinion, and the sparring that we do, even if it's brief, it's quite informative as well. I think. Yeah, I get a lot.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I like, there's so many different types of interactions on social media from, there's interactions that are just, everything from trolls to what I find really meaningful conversation, like you said, kind of sparring, kind of challenging your ideas, but in a way that you never feel disrespected at all. You never feel like you're fighting, whereas like, and also there can sometimes be a type of conversation on social where everybody just agrees with each other about everything. And I don't like that either. Like I think it's great when you can put an idea out and then have it challenged in a way that isn't fighting or mean spirited, So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, there has to be a bit of a mix, right? Sometimes you might agree with something and then you celebrate that, and then another time, it's worth mentioning something else, and then you start that discussion over that specific topic. And maybe you go in a
Yeah.
little rabbit hole
Yeah.
for a moment, but
Exactly. So, what was the latest thing we were talking about was, well, before we get into that, like what have you been working on lately? What are you, what's your role? What company are you with? What kind of stuff are you focused on right now?
okay. So for the past 10 years almost, I've been working as a freelancer consultant, focused on Magento, the biggest part of those 10 years. And currently working as a solution architect or slash engineering manager for a variety of clients. The biggest one in the last couple of years that has taken me most full time is Vimo, and currently working with Vimo Benelux as one of their solution architects. And when I do that, that's what I'm focusing on. So, and then I have a little, project here and there on the side. Um, Other than that, I've also been organizing meetups, PHP, not Magento specific, but PHP meetups in the region where I live in Hasselt, Belgium, and speaking at some
That's really cool.
conferences. Yeah, yeah. So keeping myself.
How many people make it out to your PHP meetup?
Um, before the lockdown. After that we stopped, but before that we were about 20, I would say, maybe an average, with peaks of 30,
Cool.
lows of 15. And I
Yeah.
would also live stream them, and 2 or 3 people would join, and then a few hundred maybe would watch the videos afterwards. So
Nice,
very
man.
small, very
I
small
love your
thing.
video setup, by the way. Your video setup looks great. I love
Thanks.
everything, the camera, the background, the lighting. You got it all dialed in. Um,
Thanks. It was meant to be
and
part of the meetup thing as well, right? Because I'm
oh, okay.
organizing this monthly thing, and the idea was to do that as well. But then, together with the lockdown, we kind of grinded to a halt, and we're maybe restarting soon. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, actually, what do you think about kind of like the like what like you organize a PHP meetup, and so I'm thinking about different e-commerce platforms. I'm thinking about like I'm kind of in this. mode right now where I'm trying to better understand other ecosystems. The last probably 7, 8 years of my life and career have been Magento, Magento, Magento. And I'm starting to try and better understand. I think everybody on some level is becoming more multi-platform than they were in the past. Everybody in the Magento community. So I'm
Yeah.
curious where you're at with that. Are you getting into shopware? Are you getting into other platforms? Are you really still focused on Magento?
To be honest, at a professional level, I'm still quite focused in Magento. However, I do have quite a lot of experience in other platforms. The question is whether you leave the PHP ecosystem or not for me. So Shopware, for example, I've been exposed to it. I went through the docs. I went through the features. I think it's important for me as an architect to also understand the competition, right? Like I'm very often talking with clients about why wouldn't they just go with Shopware, right? Why invest so much in a Magento build? So that's usually the discussion. I need to explain that in depth and sometimes be head to head with someone from the other technology. Maybe Shopware is not a good example of that, but I've had it with Shopify. So um, I am trying to explore as much as time allows and sometimes budgets and just more often than not in my free time other platforms, and that includes most PHP based, but a few of the other ones that are also outside PHP, like Shopify and well, mostly Shopify nowadays. It's the biggest competition, I would say. Anyway,
Yeah,
the FOMO is definitely there as well, but on the other hand, I'm quite bullish about Magento right now. So
yeah. That's cool. That's interesting. I think that I've been trying to also understand the Shopify ecosystem better. Shopware looks interesting. Hear a lot of good things about it. Spriker, hear a lot of good things about as well. And at the same time, like you really can focus on, Magento still and have quite a bit of work, obviously, just within that. So going back over to what we were talking about, what we were talking about recently on like unlimited vacation policy. So I was kind of saying that I thought it was unlimited vacation policies. First of all, is that a common thing in Belgium? Or is that because I know a lot of times in Europe it's like, you have like 6 weeks of vacation or 8 weeks or something, and everybody kind of is expected to take that amount of vacation.
hmm well, let me first qualify this. I've been a freelancer in Belgium since I joined. I've never been an employee in Belgium.
Oh,
So this
right.
is actually a topic where I'm a little bit out of my depth,
So
and
you
that's
have
why
no vacation.
so I have no vacation. uh, yeah, I make my own vacation as a freelancer. I choose when to have it, and I have to accept the fact that no, like zero is coming in during those months. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well, and it's funny because I'm in the same position myself, as a business owner. I make observations about employees and employers, and I talk with a lot of employees and employers for my job. So I'm sort of outside of it, and I'm in a place where I can say whatever I want, whereas somebody who is an employee probably doesn't want to criticize their employer's policy and things like that. So I think you and I are in this interesting position where, like, yeah, like you said, like we have sort of no vacation on some level, and also as much as we want to take. And then on the other hand, we have opinions about how it tends to work for most people in the economy.
yeah, but I think what you're doing is great. Putting these difficult questions out there, first of all, it really triggers me immediately because I think there's too little of this being really spoken about. One thing is to publish a blog post. Okay, that's great, but to put yourself out there in social media the way that you do, that's something else. That's what I think we need a bit more of. And if you or if people like you are the ones who are being the catalyst for this conversation, that's great, as long as other people join in and also become engaged. Because one of the things that I noticed in Belgium is there's a bit of a culture of not sharing this at all, and then people, they just don't know for many, maybe years, what their colleague is getting, or what the freelancer they've been working with for 2 years, what kind of situation they're in economically. And other freelancers between each other, they don't talk about this either. And in general, rates in Belgium, from my experience, are way lower. And I'm talking about like inexplicably almost lower than those in the Netherlands, and maybe we're just 30 minutes away. Right. So
Uh,
there's something that needs to happen, in my opinion. But okay, I'm biased.
the Yeah, 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 yeah. The thing that's so crazy to me about, knowing a little bit about some of these European countries and having met people like yourself in those countries, in Netherlands, in Germany, and things like that, but at the same time, not having the experience of really living there for any length of time, is I always wonder to myself, how are these economies so separate? Like it's so strange to me how everybody speaks English, and yet at the same time, I'm sure there's like in the Netherlands, like I had Guido on the podcast, Guido, recently, and we were talking about his conversion rate optimization podcast, which he does in Dutch. And I was like, I keep trying to click on your podcast and listen to it, and then it'll be in Dutch. And and then I want to hear it in English. He's like, well, we're thinking about moving to English, and but I always, it's so curious to me, and I think that's probably part of the reason, and I didn't even realize that pay was so different between the Netherlands and Belgium specifically. But I'd imagine that has to be a big part of it, that they want to work with people that are Dutch or that speak Dutch. And it's strange because they speak English so well. And like, I'm sure everyone in Belgium speaks English so well. It's weird that they don't just all sort of cross pollinate and have access to larger talent pools and all the benefits of a larger talent pool, and then the talent has access to more clients and things like that. So that's always kind of strange to me.
Well, but there's definitely a lot more going on than it seems. People do go work over the border very often. Now with the corona situation, things are changing again, uh, but they do. So a lot of people from Belgium would cross the border to work over there, and then I believe there's also a bit of the other way around, but maybe it's a bit less. I think there might be more consultants coming in, like freelancers coming in from the Netherlands to Belgium. But anyway, I'm not an expert in any numbers. um, and another thing that's funny, and probably a lot of people who are not familiar with this region miss, is that Belgium actually speaks Dutch as well. So that's not an explanation, at least in
Oh,
the
that's
area where
funny.
I live, right?
Yeah.
So,
I had no idea. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Belgium, we speak Dutch, French, and German. I'm saying we, but I'm an Argentinian who came into Belgium 10 years ago, so I'm still learning my Dutch. But they speak four languages, most of them. Even I'm not saying super
Yeah.
fluent. Some of them barely can speak any German, but when they listen to it, they will understand. And still, all of these economies are so divided, and the standards of living are so different.
Right. It's also so funny with you because I always associate you with Belgium as long as I've known you online. You've lived in Belgium, and then I forget that you're Argentinian, and then I'll see your last name and it as Somoza, and it's like, oh yeah, you can tell it's a Latin last name, but then I'm like, well, maybe that is a Belgian last. Like I always forget. And I think that's so cool, like that you're just, you've been out there for like 10 years.
Yeah, and yeah, it wasn't planned at all. Just met my wife in Germany, and here we are.
Gotcha. That'll do it. That'll do it. That'll
Yeah,
get you
yeah,
to stick around.
it did. Yeah, it did.
Um, do you miss Argentina? Do you go back a lot?
I hate answering that question because a very good part of me doesn't miss a lot of Argentina, but I
Oh,
would
wow.
say the other 50% does. So there's a lot of things that I do miss, like the culture and family, of course. There's no one from my family here except a cousin that lives in Germany. Um, I would say I'm really fine. Like I'm very happy where I am right now. So um, I wouldn't consider going back right now. Like I wouldn't even think about it. But things are
Hmm.
tough there as well. So there's that.
Right, I can imagine. So the things that you don't miss is like get like maybe like economically, politically, that kind of a thing, but then
Yeah,
missing
and I would think
family
most.
and the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, family culture. That's always nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The
Gotcha.
opportunity in Argentina is huge, professionally speaking as well. I mean, you don't have to come to Europe to make it. When you work at the level that many of the people you're interviewing are working, it doesn't matter really where you're at. Of course, with the work I'm doing, it's nice that I'm next to the clients. That's irreplaceable. But mm, but what you can earn versus the cost of living in Argentina, uh, by living there, is just that difference is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a good number of people that have gotten work through Commerce Hero in Argentina, and it's always cool when I can see somebody get a great remote job in anywhere really, but you do see that in Latin America, Eastern Europe. There's a particular cost differential and level of talent, at least that I see and that I believe personally in the last several years. And it's interesting too because I think that it's things are going to start to level out. Like I see salaries, even the last 5 years, I've seen salaries go up significantly for, like you're saying, again, people that are super talented, that have experience working remote really effectively, that have experience working for solutions partners and can just get stuff done. And it's like, it makes me think like maybe 5, 10 years from now, those salaries are going to level out. I mean, they've been going up so fast. At some point, there won't even be a cost benefit for, let's say, US or Western European company to hire in some of these regions because salaries will, they just they can only go up so much until they start to level out.
Yeah, I mean, I find it myself too. I'm starting to hire. I've always been hiring people from Argentina and other countries, and I'm starting to notice the same thing. It's starting to be to the point where,
Yeah.
okay, this is, it's getting to a point where, yeah, that business model maybe doesn't work the same way anymore. But I think that's great. I think I love that. To be honest, I would love to see uh, the amazing pool of developers that Argentina has, due to the very good education they have there, uh, really reach this international level where they're competitive, where they can position themselves in a similar way to what Ukrainians did, maybe, and have the same benefits. Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's what
Yeah.
this whole situation could even catalyze a bit more.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is. I think that's exactly what's happening. That coronavirus is catalyzing that existing trend that has existed towards remote. You said something that was interesting. You said that being close to the clients there in Belgium is irreplaceable, and I'm curious to sort of move into kind of the conversation around remote work and things like that. I mean, and you said being close by is irreplaceable. How are you feeling about remote work? What is your um, typical client look like in terms of, do you usually meet with clients? Do you have a certain amount of in-person meetings and then you do some of your work remotely? Like what is your relationship usually look like?
Yeah, so I am mixing it up a bit. I have to right now. So things that are very hard to do remotely, I will do on site, and those are brainstorming sessions and the typical session where you'd have to have a whiteboard. And there is a difference between having a physical whiteboard with you or just having to draw on a tablet and the other person somehow, there's, just starting this podcast took about 15 minutes to figure a few things out, and both of us have been doing it for a while.
Right.
So
Right.
imagine doing that with a client who doesn't have all those tools and all that knowledge. I think things could change in the future. I think we're going in the direction where remote work is possible. And I mean, right, sorry, that was very like divisive. I mean, it is possible, but not really everything that I am doing is possible to do remote, right? So being there with the person, a lot. It is different, and for the client, it's the important thing. For me, I don't care. Like I could discuss right now an entire build with you on Magento, discuss all the requirements, blah blah blah, and then specs are out and developers start working. But for a client, they need to see your face, your body language, the entire body language, and it just makes a different impression when it's time to sell. And if you're competing with someone who is on site, then the other person has the upper hand, and you don't want to do that. So um, yeah, that's, I think, the difference. I think the
Yeah,
difference comes down to sales, to be honest. I think that's where it comes down to.
Mm. It's interesting to frame it that way. I agree that, I think that like when I think about like the Magento ecosystem, I think about agencies, solutions partners, and merchants. And they are there's, they can have similarities, but I think that they can have a lot of differences. And in general, agencies are going to be much more comfortable with remote. They're much more, I mean, as an agency, technology is your business. So all of these tools you are comfortable using and things like that. And then you're probably already have a remote team or some aspects of your team are already remote. Whereas as a merchant, if you sell clothes, your business is clothes. If you sell electronics, your business is electronics. And the technology is kind of secondary to your business. So I think I'm always thinking about why are some people hiring remote? Why are some people more comfortable with remote? I think everybody's moving in that direction, but the future is unevenly distributed, and certain types of companies are going to take longer to get there, and certain companies will never want to get there. Um, but yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between the end merchant and, let's say, agencies with how comfortable they are working remotely. There is something probably still irreplaceable for merchants about wanting to work with someone in person.
Yeah, I think so too. And what you said about the typical merchant is also true. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen every other merchant that comes in is barely technical, at least when it comes to speaking about things like, Magento, e-commerce in general. Very often, it's factories that are trying to do direct to consumer for the first time, for example, right? So um, yeah, there's a lot going on already within the organization. Their organization is already like a caterpillar trying to blossom into this butterfly, and then on top of that, they want to partner with a agency, and maybe not just one, but two or three, all at the same time. And it's a huge transformation they're going through, and it's tough.
Yeah,
So having people that are there gives that sense of confidence they need to psychologically close the deal, to move forward. And uh, yeah, it does make a difference for sales and
yeah,
for dealing with a merchant. Yeah.
yeah.
And then
You
when it comes to
mentioned
development,
digital.
sorry,
Oh yeah, no, no, no. Please go ahead.
when it comes to development, I'm all in on remote, to be honest.
Right. Like you mentioned that you have devs in Argentina, so you're very comfortable working remotely with your team for delivery and things like that.
Yeah, I've done it for a while. Um, yeah, it's a lengthy discussion that we've also had, so I don't want to spoil any topics ahead of
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I truly believe in that model. Yeah.
No, feel free to jump into any of the topics that you definitely won't spoil anything.
Did you want to ask your question or?
Oh, no, I kind of already, what was I gonna say? I think I kind of already forgot about it.
Sorry, it's my
Um,
bad. I interrupted you. Sorry. Okay, but
that's okay.
no, no worries, no worries. No, we can discuss remote. I think what I wanted to tell you that I didn't tell you in private, but I think it's suiting. You're doing an amazing work in that regard. I think you're very well positioned right now, and
Thanks, man.
I've used your services with great success. I have to say. I think there might be
Thanks.
more. more of that coming, hopefully, right? If business blooms, but um, the ability to find someone skilled, I think this is one of the things that I could talk about with you a bit. To find someone really skilled grows exponentially as you expand your search in a bigger and bigger geographical area. I really do believe that. What do you think of that? Have you seen that when you deal with so many developers? Have you seen that they're actually quite spread out geographically, or is it like, yeah, everyone is in London, and then that's the only place where you should look at?
No, I for like I see people all over the place. And actually, one of the specific indicators for me that a potential client, will have less of a need for Commerce Hero is if they have an office in a specific location. So sometimes, for example, somebody will, let's say, hire one or two people in Ukraine, and then they'll go, you know what? We want to streamline things, so we want to set up an office in Ukraine and only hire people out of this local office.
Mm,
Um, so when people start to do that, a couple of things happen. For one, they have their own, chunk of people there that sort of can refer other people that they know, so they have less of a need for finding talent. It's kind of all baked in. And then I also find that they tend to want to look to pay more sort of competitive local rates, lower rates, than kind of finding these individual, like really high level individuals that are in random different places, and then are going to be maybe a little more expensive.
mhm,
So that's one of the kind of trends that I see. Um, but yeah, I was just talking to somebody today in like Sri Lanka who looked like really impressive to me, and then I'll see someone in just all over the place. And I love getting to know people in different places and things like that. And so, I'm a fan of being like fully distributed. Like I feel like the ideal is to be fully distributed where you don't have a specific office in a specific city in Argent in Buenos Aires or something like that, because then you have some of the benefits of you have some of the benefits of a global talent pool, but you really have a very limited talent pool, right? Because it's just one specific city. Whereas
yeah.
if you can be fully distributed, then you've just exploded the potential size of your talent pool. Um, so that, I'm going a little bit all over the place to
No,
answer
but
that.
that's exactly what I wanted to know, and it matches a bit my experience as well. Like I also worked with people from, I believe, also Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Argentina, Ukraine. Uh, what I find amazing, and I've done this for 10 years. I didn't invent this, of course, right? I had a mentor who started it. What I find amazing from this model is, given the same skill set, right? uh, you look at someone from New York and you look at someone from Vietnam, and of course there's advantages and disadvantages, but the one from New York is going to be so much more expensive. So if you are open-minded and you're willing to work around the quirks, you can really find affordable talent somewhere else. And what I love about this model, and this is really where my passion is that that other person is probably going to be compensated beyond what they could ever get in their country, right? um,
Yeah.
that's my that's what I love about hiring people outside, that I know that I'm actually potentially changing their lives because I do pay them much more than what they would get there, right? um,
Yeah.
and I think it's the right thing to do in this economy. It's globalization leads to that, right?
Yeah.
It's okay for the person in New York. That person, he or she is going to find works, so that's not going to be an
Right.
issue. There's more than enough work for everyone. That's not the issue. The issue is, I think there's still agencies that are local. I know I'm putting myself out there a lot saying this, and a lot of people are going to listen to this, but there are a lot of agencies that are local that, for the right reasons, they are not paying people international rates, but there are also agencies that are local and are doing that for the wrong reasons. And I think that uh, that creates a little bubble, and those people might live in that bubble for a long time because not everyone has this spirit of entrepreneurship, of putting themselves out there. And maybe that's fine. Maybe those bubbles are fine because whatever, capitalism. But I would like to believe in globalization actually reaching out through popping those bubbles and giving developers what they deserve for being in the right place in the right time in this time of the world where development is one of the things to be doing. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's like I think there was a period of time where the predominant model as an agency was you hire all local and you hire people with relatively inexperienced. You do a lot of training in house, and then clients are hiring you from other markets. They're hiring your agency, and the developers that you're hiring they didn't really have options to work directly for these companies in Europe or the US. And so their options were limited. And then now what's happening is those developers are now being able to work directly, so they're getting more of the economics, right? Because instead of having
mhm,
to work through an agency, and working through an agency can be a great thing for whatever stage of your career. If that works, that's awesome. And they get a ton of value by being trained by the company and things like that. But then there comes a point where they've reached a level of seniority, they have a level of experience that they can just work directly, and they know how to communicate with clients in these other markets. They understand not just the technical details of how to implement things, but also how to understand requirements, how to read between the lines of what a client might need or want, things like that that are so important. The communication aspect is so important and is so easy to. There's so many ways to get it wrong. It just understanding requirements, gathering requirements. So then at that point they can work directly, and then it's like the end client is happy because you're taking a middleman out,
yeah,
and middlemen are great when for certain functions. I mean, Commerce Hero is essentially, I guess you could call it that, a middleman. But they can also generally people want to be able to remove them too. So
yeah.
it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Well, I think what you say makes a lot of sense, and this is, I know, one of the discussions we had. But this thing of the middleman still doesn't add up, and let me explain why. Um, I'm gonna explain it anecdotically, right? So tell my own story, but no one listening this should take it by face value. I mean, don't ever listen to just one anecdote. I think it would be really, really interesting to have a transparent study of to what scale this is really happening or not, right? When I started working, um, uh, I started coding really early. So by the time I started working, I pretty much knew how to code websites. I didn't need much training there at all. Within 6 months, they put me directly in contact with the client. So what I was doing in this company, I was directly talking with the client, no middleman, no project manager, nothing. I was getting their requirements and analyzing what's the best way to implement them. Within a few more months, I was teaching literally everyone in that company how to do Ruby on Rails properly. So this is not to toot my own horn because the level there was abysmal. Okay, it wasn't hard to get there, but
Yeah.
what I found out later is that
Uh,
I was getting, so back then I was getting paid about €3 an hour. Okay, what I found out later is
wow.
that for that direct
How
contact
many
with the
years ago was
client,
this, roughly? Mhm.
about 10 years ago when I started my career, a bit more,
Oh, okay.
12 years ago maybe. So €3 an hour, and they were rebilling my work, and they had no overhead, no significant overhead over me because I was directly talking with the client in English. like I said, no middlemen. They were billing me for about 70 an hour, 70 euros an hour, dollars actually.
God. Yeah.
So I that defined the rest of my vision about what I think about third world countries and how developers should be hired there. And that's where I come from. That's why my passion of uh, paying them, I'm not paying them New York rates, right? I couldn't ever afford that. But if I'm rebilling them at 70 an hour, let's at least make it an even split or something like that. If I don't have any overhead over
Yeah.
them, right? I make the sale. So that for me is, it really sets me off whenever I hear a story
Yeah.
of someone being able to burst that bubble. And that's what I mean by a bubble. It's like a
Yeah.
reverse bubble.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's like on the one hand, you can like there's two approaches to that. Like one approach is to say, well, this is wrong. It's sort of obviously sort of greedy, and the company should somehow be limited from being able to do that, right? Like, well, let's make a law that you can only charge X amount of margin or something, right? But the other approach, I heard this phrase that was something like, your margin is your competitor's lunch. In other words, competitor is
Mm-hmm.
gonna, if you have whatever margin you have, your competitors are gonna come want to eat that. So if your margin is $67 on a $70 bill rate, I mean, so from a purely economic perspective, like, okay, good for you, right? Like you have a really high margin and you're probably very happy about that. But that's not going to last forever. Like not, anytime you have a margin that high, somebody else is, so the other approach is, okay, well, that does kind of suck, but here's what's going to happen. Another competitor is going to come along. They're going to pay the developer $6 an hour. They're going to charge you $10 an hour or whatever, whatever the numbers are. They're going to pay the developer 30 an hour. They're going to charge the end client 50, and then they're going to beat them because the company, the agency was simply taking too much margin. Someone else is going to take that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that would be the
I
more
understand that.
capitalistic approach to let them, yeah, let the market fight it out. But I can
Yeah.
understand how on an emotional level, it would just make you angry
Yeah.
to see that, having had that experience yourself and things like that.
Yeah. But it's not just the abysmal difference. It's also the luck I got of having someone who sort of found me. And that story would be what you just said. That guy who found me was someone who lives around New York. And I don't even remember how we got in touch. He immediately tripled what I was being paid. And for me, it was not a no brainer to go work with him, right? So he ate their margin for lunch, so to speak. But he went above and beyond. He literally left me his company afterwards.
That's
So
really cool.
yeah, yeah, I couldn't even like I'm so grateful to that person. Anyway, um, I think you, Kaylin, for Commerce Zero and anyone else who tries to find developers in Argentina, you are the guys who are the only guys who are equipped to eat them their margins for lunch. Because what I see after 10 years in Argentina is one of my best friends from childhood. He's now a senior architect at one of the biggest consulting firms in Argentina. It's a firm that I'm not going to say by name, but it's you probably heard of it over and over again. Um, I believe his salary is about $15 an hour right now, and he's working at a similar level technically as what I'm doing, right?
Tell them to sign up at Commerce Hero.
Exactly. The thing is
Yeah,
in paper this works, but the problem is Argentina and many third world countries for the matter, they don't have this free market as we do in Europe or in the US. So what's on paper working doesn't work in real life simply because there's so many more barriers to doing business in Argentina. You
right,
can't do it, and it's very profitable when you can navigate all of that. But if
right.
you are not punched out of your bubble or somehow illuminated from this situation, then you're never going to get out of it,
right,
right? So I go and visit
right.
Argentina, and in this case, for him, I didn't even tell him how much I'm earning or anything. Like that's not
Mm,
a because I'm not
right,
able
right,
to help him right now with my situation, but
right,
someone in his ecosystem could do that, right? And they would find an amazing
right,
developer, an amazing engineer.
right. Right. Yeah, it's it's a challenge because you don't. And I think about this too because I've had people, I've had people, a lot of times salaries, people like to not talk about money, right? There's many reasons why people like to not talk about money, whether it's like you were saying earlier, individuals at a company, individual freelancers in a market. Maybe it can be impolite, right, to talk too much about money. And then also, employers don't necessarily want people talking too much about money because then they're going to talk to each other. They're going to, maybe become unhappy if someone's getting more than them. And for some reason, I always have felt like, so I always try to push to have the jobs put how much they're going to pay right in the job. A lot of times people don't want to put that in the job, and then you have to have this whole dance, this whole, 3 interviews before you know how much they're paying. And I'm like, just put that up front. It's not the only factor, but it's an important factor. Let's everybody put that information up front. But I do also have to admit that I don't like the fact that it can also maybe create jealousy, or it can create you see this dollar figure and you go, well, I want that. Why isn't my number that number? And I personally believe that money doesn't make you happy, and I've seen that in my own life, and I've made decisions to make less money in certain situations and stuff like that. So it's a tough balance to get right.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult
I
topic to discuss properly.
Yeah,
Um, I like how you navigate those things. Like you seem to have like an extra radar for saying things that are tough in public and sort of getting away with it, right? I look up to that a lot.
right.
But I
Thanks, man.
think, yeah, I think it's a, I don't know how much you can learn that, but I'm certainly hoping that I can some, because I do think like even if I make a mistake, for example, saying these numbers right now, um, if it gets the conversation going, then that's enough for me, right? I'm hoping I'm not going to lose my career over saying something like this, but as long as I don't, and I can continue doing my job and move on, but maybe someone else got informed about a different reality, right? Then they can at least
Yeah,
know about it. It doesn't mean they have to achieve it. It doesn't mean that they're going to be happier. Um, it just means it's another option. Their horizons have changed a little bit.
it's an
And
option. Yeah, it's an option. It's like to be able to know what's out there. It's like, Amazon. You can go there, you can see what things cost. Like in a market, knowing what things cost in a market has so many benefits, because then you can make decisions off of that. You can make trade-offs. You can decide what you want to do. There wasn't always a time where everything had a price associated to it. Like that had to be created by society. And on some level within the job market, there's this opacity that is just sort of grandfathered in. And it's part of how society and culturally people don't talk about things, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's fundamentally a good thing. I think that transparency um, is probably in general a good thing. There's some limits to that too, though. Um,
yeah, it could
and
hurt. It
and
could
and
hurt
if
some
you,
people, right? For example, if you become jealous and overzealous about achieving a certain dollar number, you might make a lot of mistakes going to that place, right? For many
yeah,
reasons, just beyond the number itself, uh, you might not be in the place to do that, right? So you're overextending, and like in everything in life, you might tear a ligament when you overextend a muscle, right? So uh, it could hurt
Yeah.
some people, but what I'm hoping is, if anything, I hope it benefits more than what it hurts, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, and I think about another aspect to this is, let's say there's a job, it's a U.S. company, and they're paying X amount of dollars, and then someone in Europe, in Germany or the UK or Belgium sees the number and goes, "Wow, that's a really high salary," but they don't factor in the fact that you get health care in Europe, you get a lot of social benefits and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's also apples and oranges, and
Hmm. Hmm.
you have to be aware of that. Now it's still net might be good for you to get that trade off. And like you said, at the end of the day, I think allow people to make their own trade offs, allow people to make their own decisions based off what the more information, the better in general. Sometimes more information isn't always better. I mean, we see that, and it's so weird. I was talking to somebody recently, like with coronavirus, it's like there's so much information, but it's like a lot of basic things people still agree on, or there aren't studies yet, there aren't double blind studies yet. So it's like there's so much information, but then sometimes finding the signal in the noise can be even harder.
And
Um,
but in this situation, right? What is the most desirable state? To not have too much information, or have it available, but that it's just hard to find the right thing? I think that's a
right,
question everyone should answer, right? But if you ask me, I would rather, like Icarus, sort of burn trying to reach the sun than
right.
not having tried at all. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Not be allowed to reach the sun, to not be
yeah,
allowed to reach
not
the sun
knowing that
because
there's
of
such a thing as a
regulations or whatever.
sun, or like looking at the skies and thinking it's a painting. I don't know, just to give you a stupid example, but at least
Yeah,
at least it lies on me, and at least the limiting factor was myself and not whether I was informed
right,
or not. That's, to me, that's
right,
sort of like really important. But I know, I understand it's
right.
different for other people.
Yeah. And like for me, I've noticed that, and I've been starting to try to be more honest with myself about how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling jealous of something, I try to recognize that, and instead of pretending that I'm not jealous, I'll just be like, yeah, I'm jealous of this. And I've noticed that there's more and more people that are transparent about how much money they make or how much money their business makes. And um, I think that's really cool. But I've noticed that when people are way, 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 way more successful than me, like Jeff Bezos, I don't feel jealous. It's Jeff Bezos. Like,
Mm,
he's just on another planet. But when there's someone who is like a little more successful than me, then I can feel jealous. And then if I see them continually doing things and da da da, I can find that it can be unproductive for me because instead of being inspired by it, I find myself just being jealous, and I try not to, and I try to maybe meditate or something like that. But in some cases, I just would rather see less of that thing because I find it just makes me jealous.
mm,
And maybe it's a similar thing too if US companies are always talking about these salaries and you're maybe in another place and you're like, I don't want to see all these salaries all the time. That just is going to make me upset,
mm,
and maybe you just, but like you said, to have the option to choose not to see that versus to never have the option to have any of that information to begin with.
mm. Yeah, I think because the what coming from a third world country, again, super biased, but what I think is the more important factor in the salary specific case is the misinformation leads to a imbalance in power that I don't agree with. Companies getting away charging 70 euros an hour, paying the other developer 3 euros an hour without any man in the middle. Anyone could make an argument, a logical argument, that it's the right thing because whatever. But and I understand and respect that, but I'm gonna try to change it because for me, it's not just about what's logical, it's also about a bit more, and it goes into the moral area. And not everyone shares the same morals. But for me, the moral is it's not right to do that big of a difference in business.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, all of these factors come into play. What I ultimately think is more important is the mentoring aspect of finding people somewhere else and then mentoring them, doesn't matter where they are, to achieve whatever goals they want to achieve, technically speaking. And that's when you get really rewarded back, because you're really changing someone's life, not only financially it's just the byproducts, right? But really, by giving them the opportunity to grow as a person, as a professional, that it goes much more than just money. So even if they move a lateral move financially, but they achieve the position where they can, take their next steps in their career, maybe get nominated for some reward, for example, like Miguel Barpada did and other Argentinians did with the Magento Masters. I think that is what really makes it worth it, because the human component, the David and Goliath, that's the kind of story that moves me a bit. And it's not just this single skill of someone, but the team of people who help them get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. When you talk about mentoring and things like that, one of the things that I'm curious about is whether people are going to be able to hire, let's say, more junior developers remotely and train them remotely, and kind of mentor them remotely. Because I feel like in what I my experience has been that hiring remotely can work well if the person is senior, because there's certain skill set that's necessary. It's like there's two models. One model is you hire junior, they're in office, you can work very closely together. When they get stuck with their development environment set up, instead of spending 30 hours, you just say, "Oh, no, 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 fix this." And you can get things going faster. And then if you want to work remotely, you got to hire somebody that's senior, mid to senior. And I wonder if that's something that's going to change. And I'm curious whether that's something you've experimented with developers in Argentina. What your thoughts are on that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I did experience it. I think there's a component where someone just, I kind of put a name to it, right? But someone is just okay for remote work, right? Some people are great, some people are okay, and some people just, they cannot do it. Whether it's for remote work or remote learning. So to find someone who is skilled at a certain level, is good at remote working, and also good at remote learning, I think those are just three different things. Um, and it makes it all that much rarer, right? But okay, then the scale and the just numbers make it work, right? Because you're looking at the whole world, and you're eventually going to find that. So in my experience, to be more concrete, yes, it works training people remotely. You can really, really take them far when they're ready to learn remotely, which is a totally different style of learning. But I've shared SSH sessions or terminals. There's a tool you can just literally share the terminal without a video, so it's much faster. You don't need to yeah, it's not like Zoom and then there's lag.
What's that tool? Yeah.
It's been a while since I used it. I would have to
Oh,
Google it a bit. But yeah,
okay.
basically you install a plugin with like Brew if you're in Mac. The other person installs the same on Linux. It doesn't matter, and then it will just share on via text. It will share the text of each other's terminals, and you can type on the other terminal, and the other person could just watch your terminal. So that's how I've troubleshoot in the past a lot of Docker issues, a lot of just Vagrant issues on the computer of the other person. They got to
Nice.
see
That's
how
really
I
cool.
do it. So it honestly wasn't so different as being there, to be honest. I've done both, and I think,
Interesting.
yeah.
So do you primarily hire junior developers for your people in Argentina?
No, no, I do look for seniors, and I think
Oh,
it's,
okay. But it's so
but
it's so it's so it's less of an issue than of that training remotely is. Well, what's the yeah, like maybe you can flesh that out for me. Like if it
mhm.
isn't that hard to train remotely, then why not or train juniors remotely, then why not hire juniors? Is it just a timing issue that you want to get the project done soon so there isn't time to ramp up the training, whether they were local or remote, doesn't make any difference?
um, no, it does make a difference. I think the reason I'd hire seniors is mostly, yeah, time constraints. In the way that I've done business, it's been sort of like, okay, there's this project coming in, let's staff it, and so we hire a bunch of people. Um, but I've done the other thing as well. But there's a qualifier that did you ever hear about the developer competency matrix? It's a bit hard to pronounce, but
Competency matrix? I don't know if I have.
there.
That sounds very interesting.
Oh yeah, Google it. It's really interesting because it takes away the whole junior senior thing. Um, Junior, medium, and senior thing. This
Got
is a
it. Got it.
whole,
Got it.
yeah. So for me, it's a totally different conversation, but I'll try to sum it up. Junior, medium, and senior for me comes down to experience. Period. Not related at all about technical capabilities. So for technical capabilities, I do look for other things. So if you ask me if I hire someone who is senior, I mean, yeah, I do hire someone with experience. Um, but once someone is senior, and you probably saw this a lot, one senior is not the same as the other, right? So, and there could be a world of difference between them, even within the same technology stack between them, even with Magento and everything. There could still be an entire world of difference between them when it comes to productiveness, just ability to understand requirements. Those are all skills, or whatever you want to call them, that could be put into a matrix, and someone sort of did. So if you Google that, it's pretty cool. Um, so that's where you can train a senior. You can train any senior, pick any senior in the world, and there's something you can teach them, right? Because we don't know everything. So um, that's what it comes down to. And I've hired people who were juniors, but that I saw excelled at certain skills. And that's also the beauty of remote hiring. You can hone in on the skill you need for this project, rather than starting to think, do I need to hire a generalist who can just do anything because I don't know what project is coming down the pipeline, right? You can just hone in, hire that specialist for this project. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just looking at this competency matrix, and it's super interesting the way it breaks down different categories, tool knowledge to specific computer science concepts, data structures, algorithms, version control. It has about I don't know 30 or 40 categories, and then each category has these different levels of competency, which is super interesting. And I think that in some ways I do have, and I think a lot of people have an overly simplistic view of like, oh, junior, senior, junior, mid level, senior. Whereas like you're saying, there are personality traits that make people good at remote learning, even though they, let's say, don't know anything about development or know very little. They could have those traits that make them, highly independent learners, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then there can be somebody that has a lot of knowledge of computer science, but would not be effective working remotely because of X, Y, and Z. They work better in person.
Yeah. I think no
Um,
one did a competency. Is that the right way again? Competency.
Competency. Yeah, yeah.
Competency matrix for remote skills in general. I think that would be something very interesting to do, because there's definitely things that I look out for when I'm doing an interview, and they're very specific things. I would hire someone in a heartbeat if they like check any of those items pretty much.
Really? What are the? Can you tell
Yeah.
me what those are, or is that your secret sauce?
No, I'll tell you like a few, maybe. uh, their ability to be a sponge when it comes to absorbing content. I look for someone who I give them a task that I know that they don't know. And right there on the spot in front of me, they have to find enough information to solve it. So it's a bit of two things, right? Absorbing information really fast, and that means reading through entire manuals, quickly knowing where you want to go and look, right? And then the ability to apply that information to a practical task. It's really strict, but I can do this over and over again because I'm looking at hundreds of candidates, right? And to a certain degree, it worked really well so far. So why stop, right? The I think a developer is that is not more than a sponge that just consumes information and then pushes it out in code, right? It's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
little bit reductionist, but what I found is most people who've been able to be productive for a long time in their careers are that kind of people, right? We learn to learn really fast.
Right, right. So you give them a coding exercise, and then you know they haven't done it before, and then you literally watch to see what they're searching for, what tutorials they're looking at, how they're scanning the information, and whether they're like getting to the information quickly or not, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Do you know the? Let me give you. Know the name game?
The name game. No, I'm not sure I
No,
do.
NNIM. So it's
Oh, the
basically
Nim
ver.
game.
Yeah.
It sounds
Anyway,
familiar.
it's a game very few people know, and that's the point. Um, so one of the
Okay.
tasks would be right there on the spot. You would
Okay.
look at a piece of code, right? You wouldn't. I would
Uh,
tell you this is the name game. You would look at a piece of code on a different programming language from what you're used to. You've never seen this language, hopefully.
okay. Okay. Okay.
And I tell you that it's the name game, and this is the
Uh,
code, and you have to right there on the spot tell me what the rules for the game are.
so you have to look it up, and then
So you have to look
basically,
up the programming language, maybe. You could, I mean, you
yeah,
have
yeah,
all
yeah.
the options to what to look up for, right? But some people are going to say,
Right.
oh, this is not a programming language, and oh, let's go to the syntax, and then they start learning about the syntax. That's the wrong thing to do, right? So
Right.
that there you don't need to be able to code it, you just need to understand what the rules of the game are, right? So that's what I'm trying to, just
Right.
looking at the person, I try to understand how do they think, how do they zoom into the information they need to solve that
Right.
problem.
So I'm literally like I'm trying to do this right now. And I feel like probably embarrassing myself, but
No, no,
Nim
no,
is a
no, but
common. So like, yeah,
it took me,
what's that?
I did that exercise myself just not long ago, and it took me about 20 minutes to understand the rules of name on a programming language I didn't know about. I did it the reversed.
Got it.
First, I got exposed to the code, and I took upon myself the challenge of figuring out what the code did, and figured out it was name. And I thought this is great. This is a great exercise for the future.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I like that. That's a neat that's really interesting, right? Because a lot of people, for example, criticize, like, there are some similarities between that technique and the Google interview technique of where they tell you on the fly to do some complicated programming problem on the whiteboard, right? That's the type of thing a lot of people criticize. Like, that's a silly thing to do because nobody actually works that way. Like, you don't have to memorize how to code a sorting bubble sort algorithm, but what I like about your approach is it's sort of a combination of those things where they are at their computer and they can use all of the tools they would normally use as a developer. So they can Google things, they can look things up, they can read things, scan things, and then you're kind of seeing how they think in real time and how they prioritize things, which, like, as a developer, you're totally right. That's what you do all day, every day. Like you have a problem to solve, so first you Google it, and then you try to get a high level understanding. Is there a plugin that can do this? Am I going to have to do my own thing? Do I have to read some documentation? And you need like that ability to scan at a high level, and then you need to know when it's time to sit down and really focus on and read the documentation closely. Like that's so much of the challenge of being a developer. Is like you said, figuring out how to learn, what to learn, what problems to solve. You know.
Yeah. To be honest, I think that if I've done also a lot of competitive, not competitive, I never competed. I'm not that good at all when it comes to doing algorithmic programming. Like, I would fail every interview from Google or Facebook, or it doesn't matter. But I did try, and I am part of Code Wars. I don't know if you know that, but in doing those
Oh yeah,
challenges, yeah, yeah. So I think I'm a 5Q. It's like, I guess, average. So if you really apply yourself to learning those things, um, then you solve the problem. That's quite fulfilling. But what's fulfilling to me is to do it in a new programming language. I actually enjoy
yeah,
the process of assimilating content even more than the process of programming itself. So I've tried, like, doing it in Java, which is something I never programmed with, a complicated problem. So I had to learn the program, and I had to learn the problem. I mean, and I had to learn Java. What what I found out is that I actually read about maybe 10% of a manual. And by then I'm done with the solution, right? So when I stopped and thought about those things, I realized this is what we do as developers. We need to learn to read 10% of the manual and be able to produce the output that we need.
yeah, exactly.
And that the output
Yeah,
is
like the mind,
professional.
right. And finding that right 10% and not missing an important detail. There's an art to that, there really is.
It's a bit of an art. And
It's
that's the, yeah, indeed.
Yeah, totally. Um, that's super cool, man. I appreciate you sharing a little bit with me about your process. I always love to learn about hiring processes and vetting processes and all that, all that kind of stuff. And
Let me just add,
so
at the end, you do read the entire manual, right? I'm not saying that that's the only thing you do, but right. I just want to
I
qualify it.
never I don't think I've ever read the entire manual,
Okay,
you
I
know.
have, but not
Uh,
like, not just for
have
the
you?
sake of it. I mean, when it comes to Magento, I don't only read 10% of the documentation. That's what I'm trying to
Okay.
say.
Gotcha.
I'm
Dude,
talking about.
I used to know a guy that would read RFCs just for fun, like on the weekend. Like he'd read the original RFC on email, like 50 pages and just, he loved it.
That is another level. I
Um,
say RFCs are
that's
definitely
another
another.
level. Yeah, yeah, that's like totally another level. And that's the thing is like you were saying, there are kind of levels to this, like and like in Code Wars, like they quantify, things like that. And there's certain things you can quantify, like you can be, have a certain skill at, how quick you can code certain algorithms, or how many algorithms by heart, right? But then there's other thing, the whole combination of a developer or an architect's skill is like impossible to quantify. It's impossible to quantify that combination of business background, communication background, ability to gather requirements, ability to have empathy, ability to read between the lines, and then ability to get the thing done, and how much experience you have in a certain problem domain, in a certain platform, in order to create solutions quickly. Like that's the thing that is impossible to measure, And that's like
Yeah,
what a
agreed.
person like you, a consultant, kind of brings to the table.
Hopefully.
Just gave a little advertisement for you there.
Yeah, thanks.
um,
No, I think I mean I
but
agree with that. But you know what I compare this to? I I game quite a bit. It's something I just enjoy for relaxing. And what
that's
I
what I was
noticed,
gonna ask you. Remember
yeah,
back like 40 minutes ago when I was gonna ask you something and I and then I forgot what it was? I was
okay.
gonna ask if your team plays games together because that's one of the common things I found with remote teams to be able to socialize is I hear a lot of people saying they love to play games together with their team.
Well, the team I have right now, they don't play that much. I think I'm the biggest gamer out of them. Like one of them bikes about 3 hours a day, quite literally.
Okay.
So
Nice.
he has
Nice.
no other time for anything else. But but I've gamed with developers I worked with. Yes, yes, it's a great way of bonding a bit. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say about that, just really quick, is when you game, and especially if you're serious about it, you learn all of the variables. And if you're playing, let's say, Age of Empires, right, which is I think most people at least know about it, you would do things like just learn how many resources you're getting per hour, and then you would look at the attack stats and at the defense stats of a unit and at the speed of the unit and all of these little things. You would just keep that in mind when you're building your unit or your strategy or whatever. If you're playing strategy games, this is pretty common, right? Or even Mortal Kombat, right? You learn this individual attributes of each of your characters that you're playing. And if you don't like those attributes, you don't play them. Why do we limit our hiring to junior, meteor, and senior? We're doing this professionally.
Mm.
We do it in games. We learn all those little attributes of our troops and we mix them, match them together so that they are an efficient unit.
Oh,
Why don't we
right.
do that
Yeah.
professionally a bit, right?
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
a missed opportunity
It's
there.
such a
And
good
even
point.
if,
I,
yeah,
yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I totally agree with you that, and I think there's something really powerful about gamification. And I think that if for example, if there was a way to gamify the process of defining what the attributes are of a person, of a candidate, of a team member, if you could do that, and I'm even imagining like a user interface that felt like a game and had different levels and things like that, I think it would help people to think about it more like that and to get more interested and curious about what really drives people, versus when it's just a hiring decision. It's like maybe you're not that interested in it really, so you just want to simplify it and just, okay, these people have this much experience, this one's nice, and so I'm gonna hire them and I'm done. I don't know what it is, but that's a really interesting thing to kind of think about.
yeah. I mean, I don't know in the US, but here it's a huge commitment to hire an employee, right? So you want to be sure that you're hiring the right person, and um, I find it really surprising that people had dared to hire people with just 2 3 interviews without even thinking about the content of those interviews, because that's very often the case. And when they do think about them, it's maybe like you said, algorithm problem that no one is ever going to ask you to do in your real job, right? So then
Hmm.
they can solve these complex algorithms, but can they talk with a client? So I mean, that's just I think, anyway, somehow they will still work. So I'm probably missing something, but it's not the way I do it. And the risk though of gamification and all of this is sending the message that you are actually playing a game in your professional career or in your company, right? That you're just a troop in these companies. So I don't know how that would translate. I wouldn't like make necessarily make it part of the company culture, but I have in one of the companies I advised, I have showed them the matrix and I recommended that they all do a self assessment on this matrix. not a test. And I think that
Mm,
changes the message a
mm,
bit. So then they would choose for each skill where they think they are. And the feedback I got from the developers who did this is, wow, there's so much to development that I didn't realize there was. And now, especially from juniors, they will tell me, okay, now I know what's next, because they can see where they are and certain skills, and they can have this, they see this roadmap ahead of them. And
yeah,
I really
yeah.
enjoyed that feedback.
I was talking to somebody recently about like in the Magento community, like when it comes to somebody starts out and they're just getting started and they have to figure out what training materials to focus on, what to do first, how to then get your first job, how to improve, like sort of like the whole journey, like of a somebody getting started as a developer with Magento. And then there's different resources, right? Magento themselves have training resources and certifications, but there's also other training companies that put out content that's really useful. Um, Commerce Hero was involved in the job side of things, stuff like that, and almost like imagining like this roadmap, and then imagining if it was like gamified, so that they could get in and have some dashboard and be like, okay, next I have to learn this and that, and I need to learn about Magento's object model, and I need to learn about certain data structures, and then they could map that all out, and then here's the first type of job I'm going to get, and then it would
Mm,
be kind of neat to have
yeah,
some kind of an overarching system that could just, like you said, for them to know what the next step is, kind of all along the way, you know.
that's a great idea, actually. Doing that at a Magento level would be nice. But I mean, even Commerce Hero could do that, right? The story would be, as a developer, you're joining this platform. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it, but anyone who is in the position of enabling a developer to grow in their career, I think, should think about this in one way or another with it. So the journey is, you come on board with us, and we show you the path you can take with us, and we have a plan for your career. It's not just you're
Right,
joining with us and we're gonna use you. No, it's, we have a plan for your career.
right,
This is where you're going. At some point, you
right,
might hop off the train, join another train, and hopefully they're gonna
right,
have a plan for your career there too. Otherwise,
right,
you're only doing a financial transaction almost, and there's no human component
right,
there.
right,
And yeah.
right. Yeah, it's interesting because there's something cool about having an overarching plan and having like a system that somebody can just follow the system and it tells them what to do. There's something cool about that. But then on the flip side, you can make an argument that it's better for individuals to basically have their own plan. Like you
Hmm.
could say like every individual needs to have their own plan and not accept somebody else's plan for them. Like they have to figure it out.
Hmm.
And you can make that argument as well. And it's there's more complexity there. There's more of you having to figure things out yourself and make decisions about trade-offs, and that's just kind of part of life. But there's something interesting about those two kind of opposing views.
But one thing is clear: when you're working in a company, the company has a goal for you in mind, right? So
Right.
I think a lot of companies do this. I actually, most of the companies I work with do this in one way or another. They do give you some guidance towards the goal where they would like to go, and I think it's still on you to decide. Okay, am I okay with this or not, right? Um, and it would be hard to say this is the roadmap. There's just so many components there, but it could be interesting to find a game where the game is not the roadmap itself, but finding it, right? That would be the goal, not rather fixing the roadmap, but
Mm,
rather just the goal would be
yeah.
to find it together with someone in the company or more than one person in the company, that it gets laid out, and then meeting those goals, right? Like also discipline and how to say, accountability. All of those things are really important.
Mm,
Also, often under illuminated, like not in the spotlight.
hmm Yeah, yeah. Underemphasized and stuff like that.
Following through.
Um, yeah. Yeah. No, that's super interesting, and this is a great conversation, man. I had a lot of fun talking with you. And where can people find you online?
So I'm at Gabriel underscore Somoza on Twitter. It's S and then Z, my surname. I'm Somoza G on GitHub and Gabriel at strategery.io on my email. It's
Awesome,
a
awesome. Thanks,
difficult
man.
one. Ends with a Y. Strategery.
I love that domain. I love that. I love the name of your business, Strategery. I've always liked that
It's
one.
it's
And
very polarizing,
I,
actually. Yeah.
is it really?
I've had people saying you have to change it, like right there, like first thing they told me.
That's how you know you have a good thing is that if it's polarizing. If some people love it, some people hate it, right? Because
Oh, really?
if everybody just yeah, yeah. So in general, if people just sort of don't pay very much attention to something, they're not going to complain about it, but they're not going to pay much attention either because it's just kind of vague. It's just
Hmm.
bland. But if you have polarizing reactions, then there's something interesting there.
Wow, that's really cool. I will take that feedback at heart. Yeah, thanks.
There you go.
Never
Thanks, man.
thought
I
of
had a
it that way.
blast.